Everyone, welcome to this edition of the HR-VPP thematic thematic webinars, organized by the Copernicus Land Monitoring Service. Today we're focusing on urban green, and let me just give you an introduction of what to expect today. Maybe we can go to the next slide. So first of all, you have my welcoming words right now. Then you will have an introduction to the HR-VPP product by Ludwig Forstand from EEA. Then you will have a presentation on greenest European cities by Anna Traskaya, and then the influence of urbanization on the phenology of evergreen, coniferous, and deciduous broadleaf trees in Madrid by Javier Galán Díaz. Finally, we will end with a Q&A session where the speakers will answer all the questions that you, the audience, may have. And we can go to the next slide to give you some housekeeping rules. This webinar is being recorded. We ask that you follow the general courtesy rules. You will have your microphones muted unless you are asked to speak, let's say, during the Q&A session, and the presenters will give you the floor as needed. Now, as I was mentioning at the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session where you can enter any questions that you may have to the presenters, and to do so and to participate, we ask that you use Slido. You can enter using the QR code or the link in the chat, or if you're joining us through the Zoom app, then you will also see it popping up there on your screen. We can go on to the next slide. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an introduction, because as I mentioned at the beginning, and this is one of the editions of this webinar series. We've had another 3 webinars before on 3 different topics: drought impact assessment, biomass, carbon fluxes, and agriculture. Today's webinar is focusing on urban green, and we still have one more webinar in the series, which will be focusing on biodiversity, and it will take place on the 24th of April. We, of course, welcome you to join the rest, the next webinar in this series. You probably have already seen the registration for it, since you can register in the same website that you used to register for the Urban Green webinar. However, if you haven't registered yet to the biodiversity one and you want to, you can just go to the same website and sign up. And also, if you missed any of the previous webinars and you're interested in the contents, then you can go to the EEA, to the CLMS actually website, and in the events you will find the recordings of all these past webinars. I think the next slide is already on the introduction to the HR-VPP product, so I give the floor back to Ludwig.
Exactly. Thank you, Sophia. And on the past slide there will be these webinars are based on use cases white papers that are being published on the portal, and for this this white paper, it will be published in the coming weeks. So this is kind of a launch of that white paper we present first as a webinar, so you can go and read that use case later on. As usually we have a bit of an introduction to the HR-VPP product first. We start off for people who are maybe not that familiar with the base product that is in focus for this webinar. And so HR-VPP, the high resolution vegetation phenology and productivity, is part of our biophysical parameters. It's a systematic monitoring for all Europe, or the EA 38 plus UK, we call it. It's 38 countries, so the EU 27 plus additional countries in our area of interest. And on the portal you find it here on under the biophysical parameters, and then in vegetation. And so to start off, we first define phenology and productivity. So phenology, what is it? It's the timing of development of the photosynthetically active leaf foliage. It's visible as stages of leaf development, so the bud setting, leaf growth, and leaf shedding. It relates to the internal plant processes and is affected by external factors such as light, temperature, and water. And on productivity, on the other hand, is the accumulation of vegetation biomass, and this is denoting the plant growth, often measured as gross or net primary productivity, GPP, NPP, and it's affected by vegetation vigor and health. So to give a glance on the product suite of HR-VPP, we of course starts first with the Sentinel-2 input data, where we first do a level 2A atmospheric correction by ourselves to ensure that we apply the CentiCore processor version for the whole time series, which is quite important for phenological data sets. From there, in near real-time mode, we process 4 vegetation indices and biophysical variables as soon as the Sentinel-2 data is made available. So the temporal frequency here is daily, depending on where in Europe, 5 daily for the same location in Europe, and it's delivered to the users within 12 hours from sensing times. And these indices that we publish is the process and publish is the NDVI, FAPAR, the PPI, Plant Phenology Index, and Leaf Area Index. And as you will see, the Plant Phenology Index is then what the rest of the portfolio is based on. So in the second stage of the HR-VPP, we enter into the time set processing, where we produce 10 daily seasonal trajectories. And as I said, here we're using the PPI vegetation index and apply a season function fitting and gap filling. And this is processed annually for the full year and published in March, April. We're currently producing this for the reference year of 2023. And from the seasonal trajectories, we then derive the phenological and productivity parameters for 2 seasons. So 2 seasons are identified in the seasonal trajectories, and from there we can extract these metrics. So the parameters are on a temporal frequency of an annual temporal frequency, and just like the seasonal trajectories, it's delivered in March, for the previous year. The HR-VPP is based on a large number of reference data sets for calibration and product validation. These consist of a GPP measurement from eddy covariance flux towers around Europe, and we also use extensively phenology cameras for extracting greenness. We also use the PEP 725 network of manual field observations scattered over the continent, and also some agricultural crop data. So starting off with the first stage, again, back to the vegetation indices, I here just want to visualize the selection of the PPI as we did an extensive study in the ramp up of the HR-VPP production, studying these 4 and which one would be the most suitable for the VPP, deriving the VPP parameters. And it was PPI was selected since it showed to be the most sensitive for the phenological stages, and also for being the best among different land cover types that were assessed. And as you can see here, you see that is well describing the seasonality of the vegetation. For the seasonal trajectories, here visualized in relation how it works with the raw vegetation input data in black dots. So it works as this in the green dotted line is the function that is estimated, and then 10 daily, the yellow dots are derived as data sets as gap fill data sets for the full continent. And from this functions, then we can derive, we can set thresholds and derive the phenological metrics. The first arrow, for example, is the start of season, 25% over the baseline, the peak of season, and the end of season. And for all of these, we do both the value at that stage and also the date, of course. And to visualize a bit on the power of HR-VPP in terms of its high resolution capabilities, we can distinguish seasonality between, in this case, different crop fields. Here is a study area from southern Sweden, and for you who know the area, in 2018 it experienced quite a heavy drought, which is very nicely visualized here. When entering July, we see the PPI values being heavily affected by the drought and being disrupted essentially. And for the phenological metrics, to visualize a bit on the 13 that are available, we have, as I mentioned, the start of season, the end of season, values and dates, the max, the peaks of season, and from there, of course, we can derive the length, and so on. And the last two, you see the seasonal productivity, total productivity, which is in HR-VPP the integral from the curve that is established in the seasonal trajectories. So as you see in the bottom left image, you see these how the seasonal and total productivity interplay, what is being included in both. To the image on the bottom right, you see the productivity statistics for different land cover aggregations. And here, see land covers with the most productivity estimated is the broadleaf forest and the pastures. And HR-VPP has many different use cases. It's ready for many types of assessments and analysis. Here is just a visualization of an example of a valley in Austria, where you have an urban environment along the floodbed. And for example, assessments such as analyzing the impact of elevation on the season start of season dates. Things like this can be extracted from the data set. Further, HR-VPP is a well-documented product. So I recommend users start reading the product user manual, which invites for insights into what is available from the product, how things are derived, and so on. And for advanced users looking for details on the use of timesat, the input data, and so on, I recommend having a look at the ATBD, the Algorithm Theoretical Basis document. We also produce validation reports, which have, so there's the first one for the base processing from 17 to 2020, and then we have had annual updates since for the 21, 22, and now coming soon the 23 processing. There's also some manuals describing different types of data access. HR-VPP is quite a vast and complex data set with many different raster layers, tiles, and so on. So there's a machine APIs and machine-to-machine APIs available for use. There's also some tools to ease data download and also analytics, choosing the primary seasons and so on, MATLAB tools. The HR-VPP is foreseen to be produced for the coming future. We are now entering kind of the second phase of HR-VPP this year, where we foresee some evolutions to be implemented. One major that we are aiming for is the addition of above background biomass, so extending how productivity metrics are derived. And this essentially means introduction of gross primary productivity and potentially also the net primary productivity. And the introduction of this, we also see that it might change fundamentally how HR-VPP is processed with the seasonal trajectories and the indices that it's based on and so on. We also foresee adding the addition of tree cover disturbances to this production, where we hope to derive metrics such as timeliness, duration, magnitude, and recovery regeneration in the short and long-term disturbances identification system. And due to this, we foresee a reprocessing. We also foresee a reprocessing to align with the Sentinel-2 collection 1 that has been processed for the past year. And we also foresee a number of NRT vegetation indices to be reduced. So keep up to date with HR-VPP because there's many updates coming in the coming year. That was it for the introduction. Now we will move on to the next presenter. And Sophia should have posted a new question in the Slido.
Yes, I actually didn't mention this, but as most of you have actually seen on Slido, you can not only share your questions for the speakers, but we're also posting some questions for you, the audience, and we invite you to answer to the questions. And right now, as I see there are answers coming up, the question is, which elements of the HR-VPP would be most important for your application? Anna, the floor is all yours. You're muted.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. I will share my screen now, and I'll launch the presentation in a full screen mode. Okay, my name is Anna Terske, and today I'm going to present a case study on the urban vegetation, together with my colleagues from the Department of Physical Geography and Ecosystem Science from Lund University. We will present how the green vegetation in a city can be assessed, and we will demonstrate the potential of the HR-VPP product, its applicability to this use case. We believe that this study can be used in many areas of urban development, first of all in urban planning, but it will be also interesting for the wide public, especially city tourists. So we know that the green vegetation is one of the major resources in urban areas. For instance, it helps to improve air quality by reducing the carbon dioxide and other pollutants in the air. It also helps to regulate the temperature in the cities by reducing the urban heat. And it, of course, reduces urban noise and provides some habitats for species, different animals and birds, and for the humans, it's especially important to provide some space for recreation and leisure. And we all know that being surrounded by green vegetation can improve your mental health and provide some good aesthetics to the life. So how to estimate greenest of the cities? Of course, we will provide some approach that covers not only the actual areas of the cities covered by vegetation, but also we will consider the phenology component and its importance in the assessment of urban green vegetation. Because some of the land cover products can successfully provide the information about the structure, the amount of the green vegetation, but we all know that it's not only the actual areas of vegetation that are important, but also for how long we can observe the green vegetation being in the city is also affects how we perceive this city and its greenness. So our study covers 4 European cities, Stockholm, Ghent, Paris, and Budapest. We have some latitudinal gradient in their location, as you can see from the map, and this will be visible in the phenology data further. The cities are very different. They are different in area, from 100 square kilometers to roughly 500 square kilometers. And to make the comparison of them easy and smooth, we have built the regular 1 kilometer grid and overlaid it to the cities, and then calculated some metrics within this grid, and then compare the differences and similarities between the cities using that grid. As input data, we used HR-VPP rasters of 10-meter resolution. We used start of season, end of season, length of season, and total productivity, which correspond to the specific point on the vegetation index curve as it changes along the year. So in this curve, you can see how these points of the rapid increase of the vegetation index and rapid decrease of the vegetation index are marked with start and end of the season. And the length of the season is a subtraction between end of the season and start of the season, and the productivity is the area under the curve. All of these raster products were used along with quality flag raster, which we used as a filter of uncertain values of the pixels. So we used only quality flag higher than 9 to be sure that our results satisfy the uncertainty criteria. So first of all, we defined vegetation in each of 4 cities by classifying all the images to vegetation and non-vegetation areas. And we used a specific threshold of 500 from total productivity. And we identified that areas which have total productivity higher than 500 are corresponding to the green vegetation. We proved it by visual analysis of Google Earth imagery of 0.5 roughly meter resolution, and for the further analysis we used this vegetation mask. And as you can see, we have this grid overlaid on this mask, and we calculated statistics within each cell of this 1 kilometer grid net. In each of these cell, we have first calculated the vegetation fraction in percent for each of 4 cities. And here we can see that mainly for most of the cities, the center is less vegetated than the surroundings. And for some cities like Paris and Ghent, we have a clear borders of green vegetation. For example, in Paris, we have 2 big forested areas on the west and on the east part. It's Boulogne and Vincennes forests. And other parts of the cities are not so vegetated. And the same thing about Ghent, which has its vegetated areas mostly on the west. But as to Budapest and Stockholm, these cities are more vegetated comparing to others, and they have more smooth and various vegetation fraction. And we have 60 to 80% fraction is most frequent for the cities, which implies that Budapest and Stockholm are the greenest cities out of our selection. The same was done for the length of the season raster, which was also which was used for the calculation of the mean values in each cell of the 1 kilometer grid. And here we can assess for how long each city stay green, for how many days. And here we also see some distribution of the length of the season, both within the city and across the cities. Here we can see that Ghent has the highest values of the length of the season, which means it stays greener for longer times, while Stockholm, of course, due to its latitudinal position, has less long vegetation season. And we can see that for the less green parts of the cities, for example, in Paris center, we have less vegetation and less and lower length of the season. These box plots can be used to compare the statistics that we calculated across the cities. We have analyzed total productivity, vegetation fraction, and the length of the season of 2022. 2022 HR-VPP data is the most recent data that we used in this analysis, but of course it can be analyzed for other years previously. Ghent is the leader in total productivity and in the length of the vegetation season, while Budapest is the leader of the vegetation fraction. Stockholm is on the second place, and we can see that vegetation fraction is more or less equally distributed between the cities, so the size of the box are roughly the same, while total productivity and length vary a little bit more. Some short version of statistics we have also calculated using the HR-VPP product of 2022. And here we present some mean and standard deviation values within the city border. So one value per each city, where we can again see that the Budapest is the greenest cities out of these four, and Ghent is not so green on the vegetation fraction, but the leader in the length of the season, which means that maybe it's not so green, but stays green longer. We have also analyzed these short statistics metrics over the 5 recent years, and we compared mean total productivity and mean length of the season. Here you can see that both metrics have its latitudinal gradients. So Stockholm has its lower values on both metrics, and Ghent has higher values in both metrics. And all metrics were affected by the 2018 drought, which resulted in a low values of mean total productivity, and it also impacted the length of the season, especially in the city of Ghent. And 2020 was also the remarkable year, as we can see that both metrics are decreasing in this year, and then in 2021 they remain at the same values as it was previously. And one of the most interesting metrics that we have already calculated to account for vegetation greenness is the probability of seeing green vegetation in the city. So how likely is it to see green vegetation in Paris at a certain location at a certain date? Let's say we take current date, 13th of March, and how we can assess the probability of seeing green today in 13th of March. So for this, we performed binary vegetation classification for the exact day of 13th of March, and we applied some conditions as with the start of the season and end of the season. So we defined that we see green when our current date, 13th of March, is higher than, is greater than the start of the season and less than end of the season. It means that our date is within the vegetation period. And if we have this condition satisfied, we say yes, and we apply and we define this territory as green pixel. And if the condition is not satisfied, so we say no and classify this area as no green, but 0. Then we repeat this binary classification for each of the years, starting from 2018 and ending to 2020. And then we record all the values of yes and no green for each pixel. For example, for certain pixel, we have green in this date in 2018, but it was not green in 2019 and wasn't green next year, but next 2 years were green. And this result into 3 out of 5 positive cases of greenness. So we saw green 3 times out of 5, which result in 60% of the probability of this of seeing green vegetation. So this method of calculation was applied to all the dates, to all cities, and then was aggregated to months and seasons. And here, with this 12-month map, we can answer the question where it's better to visit Paris, in which month. on the basis of the probability of seeing green during these 5 years. From this time series map, we can see that it's the most probable that we can see green vegetation is from April to September. And in March, the probability is starting to increase. And in October, started to decrease, staying with low values during the November, December, January, and February. So definitely spring and summer are the most greenest time for visiting Paris. This statistics was also aggregated not only in time, but in space using this 1 kilometer grid that we previously introduced for other metrics. We aggregated this probability for the season, winter, spring, summer, and autumn. For spring and summer, it was similar rasters with 100% probability of seeing green within all of raster of the grid cells. And in winter, we have the probability less than 10%. Autumn shows the most variability of the probability of seeing green. So we can see green vegetation in different parts of the city, but with different amount of certainty. And the same statistics was calculated for Budapest and Ghent, showing the same results, that autumn is the most unstable period in terms of vegetation greenness. And for sure, to see the green vegetation, you need to visit these cities during spring or summer. And definitely no vegetation can be seen in winter from December to February. To provide a conclusion for our study, I would like to emphasize that HR-VPP product provides quantitative information about green vegetation distribution. For this, we can use total productivity rasters. The vegetation dynamics in seasonal dynamics can be assessed with HR-VPP phenological parameters, start, end of the season, length of the season. And with this approach, with this methodology, this study demonstrates the different uses of HR-VPP product in urban planning, tourism, and other applications. So lots of different questions that we can answer using these types of statistics that we have calculated. So this is all from my presentation. I will invite the audience to have a look at the questions that were posed in the Slido, and I leave the floor for the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Anna. And yes, first of all, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I hope people share some of their questions on Slido for the Q&A session. But in the meantime, we are posting our third and last question of the day for the audience, which is how useful is the HR-VPP product for urban studies and planning? And we wait for your answers. And without further ado, Javier, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Anna, for your presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so first place, hello, everyone. My name is Javier Galandia, and I am a researcher at University Complutense in Madrid. And I'm going to present a study we published last year on the effect of urbanization on tree phenology in the city of Madrid using mostly Copernicus land monitoring data. And also, before moving on, thank you to Ludwig and Sophia for organizing the webinar and considering me. And also all the people involved in the development of these fantastic products that we used for this study. Okay, so Ludwig already introduced some concepts, but I will repeat some of them myself. So phenology refers to the seasonal recurrent events taking place during the life cycle of organisms and their relationship with biotic and abiotic factors. Therefore, plant phenology constitutes a key indicator of ecological changes. For instance, plant phenology has important consequences on the functioning of ecosystems because it is related to ecosystem productivity and the water and nutrient cycles, and it also determines relevant aspects of the dynamics of the organization of biodiversity and ecosystems. It also has key repercussions from the public health point of view, as it is, for instance, the case of the flowering phenology of species with high allergenic potential. Urbanization modifies the meteorological conditions on a micro and meso scale in cities, which may cause phenological changes in urban vegetation. It has been reported, for instance, that the increase in temperature associated with urban density, which is a phenomenon termed urban heat island, causes an advancement in the start of season and a lengthening of the trees growing season in urban vegetation. Therefore, understanding the effect of urbanization as well as other drivers of global change on plant phenology and productivity is crucial to evaluate the consequences of human impacts, but also anticipate solutions in urban planning. So we looked at the relationship between urbanization and plant phenology in the city of Madrid. Madrid is located in the Madrid Autonomous Region, and which is where it is Spain's capital and largest city. And Madrid, with around 7 million people, is one of the most populated European metropolitan areas. Previous studies have explored the response of vegetation phenology to urbanization, but to our knowledge, just a few studies have explored this relationship in Mediterranean cities at such a fine scale. And before moving to the methods, I wanted to share some preliminary analysis that motivated this study. So here on the left, we can see the relationship between the percentage of built-up area and land surface temperatures in the city of Madrid for the study period, which is between 2017 and 2020. We see a strong positive relationship between these two variables. And on the right, this is using MODIS data. We see the urban heat island effect in Madrid. What we can see here is that in the main metropolitan area, the night land surface temperature is 3 degrees Celsius higher than in surrounding less urbanized areas. So in the city center would be like 14 degrees Celsius and around 11 degrees Celsius in less urbanized areas. So our main objective is to quantify the relationship between urbanization intensity and the start of the growing season date, length of the growing season, end of the growing season date, and annual productivity of different vegetation types in the city of Madrid. And briefly, I'm going to present the workflow for this study. So we use different datasets derived from Sentinel-2 imagery and provided by the Copernicus Land Monitoring Service. So first, we use the tree cover density product, which provides a proportional crown coverage per pixel. And we used pixels with tree coverage rating greater than 75%, just to ensure that the phenological signal of the pixels is clear and representative of the vegetation class we are going to distinguish. I will explain this in a bit. Second, for these pixels, we use the dominant leaf type product to determine whether they represent coniferous or broadleaf vegetation. And third, we use the phenological data derived from the high resolution vegetation phenology and productivity that they introduced before. So the first thing we did is that because in Madrid, all coniferous species are perennial and broadleaf vegetation could be either deciduous or evergreen, we ran a random forest classification to reclassify the original dominant leaf type categories into less ambiguous categories better adapted to our study case. So what we did is we exported around 2,000 observations to Google Earth Pro and basically manually labeled them into deciduous, coniferous, sclerophyllous vegetation, and manage. Then for these observations, we extracted the median phenological and productivity indices, ran the random forest classification algorithm, and then retain points with a class probability greater than 80%. Overall, the accuracy of the random forest classification was quite good. It was around 0.9. And finally, the observations we consider are basically two types of observations. So we consider, on the one hand, evergreen coniferous points, which are those classified by the dominant leaf type as coniferous, and also by our classification, but by our random forest model. And the other would be deciduous broadleaf points, which are those classified as broadleaf by the dominant leaf type and deciduous by our classification. So as I said before, we consider three phenological indices and one productivity index. And what we did is to relate these indices to the urbanization intensity around in each observation. So first we filter pixels that had only one growing season throughout the study period, and where the start of season and end of season dates occurred within the same year. And we ran multiple linear regressions, including elevation as a covariable, to explore the impact of urbanization in these indices. Urbanization intensity was estimated using a 500-meter radius, a circular buffer of 500-meter radius around each observation. And it was estimated as the proportion of pixels considered as railways or built-up areas, according to the European settlement map. Then, well, the results I'm going to show now is the comparison between phenological observations from highly urbanized areas, which are those with where the proportion of built-up area is greater than 66%, and low urbanized areas, which are those with where the proportion of built-up area is lower than 33%. So here in this figure, we can see the contrasting phenological responses to urbanization of the both vegetation types we consider. On the upper panel, we see the coniferous vegetation, and on the lower panel, the deciduous broadleaf. The y-axis represents the difference in days between the phenological index of the value of the index for observations in highly urbanized areas minus low urbanized areas. What we see here is regarding the start of season date, which is in the left panel. We see that for coniferous vegetation, there was a delay in the start of season with increasing proportion of built-up area. And this happened for the entire study period. This delay in the start of season was between 6-9 days. So the start of season for coniferous vegetation occurred between 6-9 days later in highly urbanized areas. And we found the opposite pattern for deciduous broadleafs. So we reported an advancement of the start of season date with a proportion of built-up area from 1 to 12 days, which is, by the way, maybe the most common pattern in these kind of studies. Regarding the length of season, we found that it seems to match the pattern of the start of season date. So in highly urbanized areas, coniferous trees had shorter season lengths, and whereas the opposite pattern was found for deciduous trees. We found very diverse, like little consistent results regarding the end of season date. So there was greater uncertainty regarding the autumn phenophases for both vegetation types, probably because of the interplay, because many controlling factors. Actually, previous studies have found that the end of season date to be less sensitive to temperature, which is the main factor driving the advance of spring phenophases. And these studies have highlighted that, for instance, water stress could play a major role. So it's a phenological index that is quite difficult to model. And finally, regarding productivity, we found that deciduous trees and coniferous trees in highly urbanized areas were more productive than those in low urbanized areas. This pattern was consistent across all years and of the entire study period. Therefore, the increase in impervious surface coverage, intensification of anthropogenic activities, and other factors associated to urbanization enhance the growth rates of vegetation in highly urbanized areas. Just finally, some conclusions. We found strong support for our hypothesis that the urbanization gradient influences tree phenology in the city of Madrid, with more consistent findings in the parameter of start of growing season date. Our results indicate that evergreen coniferous and deciduous broadleaf vegetation showed contrasting phenological responses to urbanization. And also we found significant interannual variability in the strength and direction of the phenological responses of these two vegetation types to urbanization. These variations may be mediated by interannual differences in specific factors such as temperature, for instance. And well, that's it. So thank you for listening, and yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Javier, for your presentation. And now we open the floor to the Q&A session. So any questions that the audience may have that you can share through Slido. We already have some questions here. I think these were for Anna. So one of the questions was using HR-VPP data, would it be possible to map these parameters with greater granularity? So they mean if they could use a grid with pixels smaller than 1 kilometer.
Yes, sure. The same methodology can be applied for different grid resolution. Of course, 1 kilometer was roughly the grid cell that applicable for these 4 cities. But if you have a larger city or a smaller city, the grid cell can be increased or decreased. The same statistics can be applied easily for another resolution grid.
And we have another question for you, Anna. Could you upscale the methodology for all cities EU-wide? And do you have plans to do so? Apparently, they're interested in measuring the quality of GI over time.
We don't have specific plan to calculate the same statistics for all cities, but it can be possibly done, of course, since the same methodology can be applied for any territories containing green vegetation.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, but to Javier, you focused specifically on Madrid, but could you use the same methodology in other cities, at least in Spain? Would it be easily transferable, or would you need to make any specific changes?
Yeah, definitely. We ran a study using lower resolution phenological data from MODIS at the European scale, and we found similar results. And yeah, definitely we could use this information. This dataset has a way better resolution to answer the same question.
And also in line with this question, although this may actually be more for Ludwig, for more of a CLMS overarching perspective. Someone asks if it's possible to use this same methodologies in another cities, but of the global south. So use the framework in non-European cities.
Yes, yes and no. For the HR-VPP, it's only produced for the, as I said in the beginning, the EA38. So it's only for the European continent. However, in lower resolution, in medium resolution, domain derived from Sentinel-3, there has recently been launched within the Copernicus Global Land Service, a land phenology land surface phenology data set within the CGLOPS. And actually Lars knows a lot about this. Has it been released yet?
No, not yet, but it will be released. I think there are other data sets at coarser resolution that could be used with similar methodology. And of course, it's also possible to do the full analysis on any city worldwide, because these data are actually available worldwide. It's just that we have done all the pre-processing in Copernicus to derive these data sets. So then it would be necessary to go back to basics and do all the analysis from the beginning. So it's all in the documentation, but in a practical sense, it might be rather cumbersome effort, but it's not impossible.
No, exactly. For if you have a study area for one city, it should be possible to apply timesat and the Sentinel-2 imagery. But indeed, it's quite heavy processing if it's a bigger study area than that.
Thank you. No,
yeah.
Sorry, Ludwig, go
No,
ahead.
maybe I saw the next question was quite related. So maybe Jonas has asked about the at the beginning. It was stated that the service is only present in EU country. And that is it's EU extended than EU. It's the EU 38 plus UK. So it's indeed the EU, that's 27 countries, and the UK, and then neighboring and cooperating countries. So that's Switzerland is included, Norway, Iceland, also the West Balkans, Turkey. So we're covering most of the continent, let's say, depending on where you draw the line of the European continent.
Thank you for the clarification. And I see we have another question. Let me find it. Yes, this one was for Anna as well. Do you consider the product could be used as a proxy for a city being actually impacted by a drought? Example, by comparing with a 5-year average?
Yes, I think so, but maybe I will transfer this question to Lars Eklund, since his research covers drought most than mine. So the question is how, if we can use our product as a proxy for estimation drought in the city.
Yes, sorry, I was a bit, I was just writing a question to Javier. But anyway, yes, we have made a previous study on drought where we looked at the response of our vegetation indicators to drought, both in forest and in croplands. And we have noted very strong response in croplands, but also some response in forest areas. We have not looked at urban areas, and this could be quite an interesting study. What we need to, of course, ensure is that we have enough data to sort of make sure that we are not seeing some local effects that are not caused by general drought, but are caused by some other factors that could be influencing different parts of the city, for example. But for sure, I think this is a possible application.
I think That answers the question, and I see we have a couple more answers. Ludwig, you wanted to chime
Yeah,
in?
I just wanted to mention that we had a similar webinar as well on HR-VPP for drought impact assessments in the autumn, and this, as with all other of these webinars, is recorded, and you can go and visit that event page on the CLMS portal. And of course, also the use case paper is published there as well for that Lars produced.
Good that you mentioned the recordings of these events that we see, because I don't want to miss any of the questions. I think this one is for Javier. What might be the effect of forest decay, few patches of dry canopies on HR-VPP phenology metrics? Can this be obscured somehow by the surviving trees?
I'm not sure I understood the question. So you mean if that affects our results? Or?
I believe so, because yes, let me just reread what might be the effect of forest decay, so few patches of dry canopies on HR-VPP phenology metrics. Can this be obscured somehow by the surviving trees?
I think that's a bit of a technical question, right? In our case, we mostly consider urban vegetation, and we only consider observations that were there for the entire study period. So we only consider trees that had like a consistent phenology curve over the 4-year period of the study. We discarded any weird observations or observations that only had data for 1 year.
I hope that answers the question. Otherwise, the person who posted it can write a follow-up question to that one, or raise their hand if they want to clarify anything. We also had another one for you, Javier. Have you been able to draw some conclusions regarding the different responses between coniferous and deciduous?
Yes, so we found different responses regarding the start of season and also length of season. We want to look at this at the species level, where we actually don't know why. We were expecting also an advance of the start of season date in coniferous species, so we don't really know where that happened. So yeah, we want to look at more specific mechanisms that might explain this. Maybe it's specific differences between the different within the coniferous vegetation type, but that's the main difference we found.
Thank you. And we have, I believe it's the last question. I'm not sure who it's targeted to, so I will just throw it to the ether, and whoever feels inclined to answer can reply. Can we compare nightland surface temperature with LST captured by satellites?
Yeah, I think he or she means the slide I showed, right? So what was the question again? If we can explore that pattern?
Can we compare nightland surface temperature, LST, with LST captured by satellites?
But I'm not sure what is the first element of the comparison. So so night LST from satellite data compared to what?
Here it says night land surface temperature.
Maybe direct observations. So if he means direct observations, yes, like we actually like kind of validated that data set we use from MODIS with observations from stations we have in Madrid, and they are very correlated. Like air surface data was very, very correlated to land surface data estimated from MODIS.
I suspect that's what they meant, but again, they can just follow up and let us know. I think we have answered you have answered all the questions that we had, and we're finishing on time, which I'm very happy about. Ludwig, I don't know if you want to say some finishing words.
No, other than thank you for joining us. It was very interesting on this use case, a bit different from our other use cases on the urban context. And as was mentioned in the beginning, please join us for the next one, the last one of this 5 webinar series, where we're gonna talk a bit about how HR-VPP can be used for biodiversity, which is yet quite a different use case again. It's gonna be interesting.
Thank you very much to the speakers and to the audience for joining us and for being so engaged today. And we see you next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.